working? Okay, and just for the record, I myself am not a veteran, but I work with mostly veterans, so supporting them today. So Hirepurpose is a New York-based startup, and we help Fortune 1000 companies reach and hire military talent. And we also work with transitioning service members to help them make smarter career decisions once they actually leave the military. A little background on us, like I said, we're New York-based. We have 20 employees, and we were founded in 2011 by Zach Iskell, who is a combat-decorated Marine veteran. And during his time in the service, he was actually in charge of recruiting for Marine Corps Special Ops. It's a pretty important role. And the way that you do it, you actually have to assess someone's fit for a job before they've actually ever done it before. And he took that concept once he left the service and thought, what if I apply that to the civilian sector? Because one of the big problems is companies not understanding how military talent converts. So let's help veterans identify companies, and companies identify veterans based on an assessment. And that was the first iteration of Hirepurpose in 2011. The feedback that we got was that the technology was great, but it wasn't enough. The people seemed like they would be a good fit for the company, but they didn't have the necessary skills. So then Zach went back to the drawing board, and in 2014 relaunched with an extra layer of consulting. So in addition to the technology, we now consult with companies on the front end and consult with veterans on the back end. And that's when I joined the team. We had 13 launch partners who kind of took a gamble on us. And now 2 years later, we have 100 partners that run the gamut from finance companies to your traditional military recruiters, manufacturing companies, technology companies. We currently work with Salesforce and LinkedIn. And basically, at this point, we do 1 to 3 year subscriptions where they work with us, we identify the talent, and we work over the course of 1 to 3 years. So for the purposes of this event, Jonathan asked if I could talk about what our problem is that we're solving and go through the demo. The challenge is that there are a bunch of problems around veteran hiring, and that's what we learned with the first solution, which was technology-based and only addressed one of them. So I'm going to quickly go through the 3 problems that we address and then highlight the aspects of our product that touch upon each. The other important thing to note is that in everything we do, we consider both our stakeholders, our clients, and our users. So I think it's important to look at the problem from both angles as well. So to start with, one of the biggest problems that we hear about is branding, actually. So take Verizon, for example. They're a client. Veterans are really familiar with them from a cell phone provider perspective, but they are not familiar with them from an employer perspective. It's not one of the first companies they think of, and it's usually the companies that have more storied recruitment programs, like a GE, that they'll consider after the service. So the problem for employers is that they're not being considered. The problem for veterans is that they're not even aware that a company like Verizon, which is great for military, is available to them. So one of the things that we do on our site is actually create profiles for each employer. And we go into detail about why it's a great place for military to work through visualizations. We show where the jobs are located, which is really important as people are planning relocation. And then I think the most important aspect of this is actually highlighting veterans within the company who are happy working there and who can explain how they got there and why they like it. It really helps for folks to envision themselves in that role. The other thing that we do that's pretty unique is our content site. This is called Task and Purpose. As you can see, it's not just career content. We have a ton of stuff for Veterans Day. On this site, we get 1 to 2 million monthly unique visitors, and they're all in the military community. They're active duty, they're veterans, they're spouses. So it's a fantastic audience to brand companies in front of. You can see right now we're running a bit of our own campaign because of Veterans Day traffic. But typically, you'll see employer brands there and alongside. In addition to just the display advertising, which is really soft branding, we have a whole section on careers. And every week, we profile 5 jobs. Either, you can see here, seasonal jobs. We do jobs in Florida. We look at the categories that matter most to our audience, and we aggregate them to brand multiple employers. And even beyond that, we do articles that are company specific. So this one did really well, not surprisingly. Vets love Activision. But this was an example of one that we push out through our network. So between the company profile and all the branding on task and purpose, we're pushing this out to our Facebook network, which has 300,000 followers. We've got 70,000 folks on our email list, and like I said, 1 to 2 million visitors monthly on the site. So it's a pretty aggressive approach, and it's been working. The second problem that we see is strategy. So the biggest issue on the company side is, how do I reach veterans, where do I reach them, and how do I do it in a cost-effective manner? The biggest issue for the veteran is, where do I begin? What companies do I look for? What's going to be a good fit? So the way we manage that, this is the consulting aspect that I mentioned earlier. So we have a team, pull them up now, a team that works both with companies and candidates. Will Lineweber, our Director of Recruiting Operations, works with each company that we bring on board to identify 10 to 15 roles that are national and that are going to be a good fit for veteran talent. And once he identifies that, he helps the company identify what bases actually produce that talent. So we have relationships with about 60 military bases, and we work closely with the transition managers, the people helping folks out of the program. And we can, in some instances, connect the company directly to the transition office. In other instances, we go to the base and represent them on their behalf. So in that way, we can either help to set up a program or be a force multiplier. The other two folks you see on here, Rick and Corey, work directly with candidates. So anyone who signs up for Hirepurpose gets access to them. They can do resume reviews. They can help identify what companies are a good fit. And most importantly, they're helping to tell candidates about the roles that Will is learning about. So it's basically connecting the company directly to the candidate and saying, here are the roles that we can hire you into. These are going to be the best fit. They also sometimes are cheerleaders, which makes a big difference for these folks, especially the ones who've never worked in the civilian workforce before, just telling them to keep going. And they've been a really effective team. And just to give you a sense, here's some examples of bases that we're going to be visiting. This calendar will be built out a lot more, but mostly, where they're all located. So now the third problem that we encounter is most important to our stakeholder at the organization. And usually we're working with the diversity and inclusion manager or the veteran recruiting lead. And their big problem is not necessarily knowing which veterans or who the veterans are that are applying to their jobs. And this happens for 4 reasons. 1, veterans don't self-identify necessarily if they're going through the system. 2, they drop off. I mean, everyone gets frustrated with job search, but I think this audience in particular feels affected by it. And then 3, they apply to jobs that aren't a good fit for them. And that's something we're working on through our product and the career coaches to help identify that, but you still get folks who are applying for the wrong job. If a recruiter gets a bad applicant or an incorrect applicant, they're just going to ignore them. And 4 is that most of these applications go directly to the recruiter and not the person who's actually in charge of veteran hiring. So unless there's a strong network in place and those candidates are getting bubbled up, all those 4 things have to not happen in order for a candidate to get considered, and that's pretty bad. So the way we addressed this was actually launching an employer dashboard. So this is a Morgan Stanley example, but for the Morgan Stanley folks in the room, it's not real. And someone named Frank Stern did not apply to 100 jobs. But this is an example of what it would look like from the employer's end and how that veteran recruiter would see it. So basically, say I'm Frank Stern. I hear about Morgan Stanley from a Task and Purpose article. I click through to read about the company. I love it. I apply to a few jobs. About an hour after I click to apply, I'm going to get an email that says, hey, did you actually complete that application? Because each person goes off to the company site and we lose them. So Frank says, yeah, I completed the application. I completed like 40 of them. So he confirms them all. And then immediately, as soon as he does that, the person who's in charge of veteran recruiting at Morgan Stanley sees his name on this dashboard. In addition, she can see his resume. Is he actually a good fit? So companies are using this in a variety of ways. We have some that are sending every single candidate directly to recruiting managers and saying you need to follow up with them. We have some that are using it more for building out a veteran talent network. So say they want to follow up with the veteran community. There's some, one of the companies, the head of recruiting, emailed a candidate and said, I see you applied for this job. you're not a good fit, but I would love to talk to you because I think you're a fantastic candidate. And that would never happen otherwise. The other thing that we added that I think is pretty interesting, it was based on client feedback, is also indicating who's viewed the job. So obviously, if someone confirms they self-report an application, they're very interested. The job views really come into play for companies that are standing up new recruiting programs and want to build their network of veterans. So like I said, if they have a veteran talent network they want to send regular emails to, they can reach out to these folks. If they want to encourage them to show more interest, say, hey, come to our webinar, this is an opportunity to do so. But basically, this tool empowers our key stakeholder at the organization to be able to follow up. And it also empowers the veteran to be visible in a way that they weren't previously. So, so ultimately, these are the 3 problems that we're currently focused on solving. Problem 1 and problem number 3, we're primarily using technology solutions. Problem 2 is the one that we're actually looking to focus on in 2016 to create more efficiencies around and see how much of those high-touch career coaching efforts we can actually use, bring to an online network. But going forward, we're going to continue addressing our product the same way we have been, iterating, figuring out what problems are affecting both candidates and our clients, and continuing to make sure that we're better serving the community. Thanks. That's me. What's that? Oh, sure. Any questions? Yeah?
What types of jobs are veterans generally good at and why?
It really depends. So the way we typically look at candidates is based on what they did in the military initially. So did they have a technical role? Did they have a non-technical role? Were they an officer? Are there certain skills that you gain out of that? I think the most difficult part of the community to serve are the non-technical enlisted folks, so people who are in infantry. And usually when they get out, the options that are available to them are limited to truck driver or security guard. And those aren't bad options, but those are literally the only options. So for some, like the junior military officers, the technical folks, there are a lot of opportunities that are well aligned with what they did in the service. With the enlisted non-technical, we have to work pretty closely with the companies to identify what role is going to be the best fit. And for ones that have large programs, like AT&T, for example, it's easier because we can have them look into their current employee base and say, all right, these line technicians. Line technicians are a fantastic job, and we already have a lot of veterans in them. This could be a good thing to hire more for. For the companies that are standing up new programs, it's a little more challenging, but the guys who are the career coaches are all veterans, and they also have civilian recruiting experience. So they have this really unique skill set of understanding both sides and being creative about how they approach that problem. Is that? Exactly, and historically, the junior military officers have been the most attractive segment. And there are headhunters out there that will charge a significant amount to bring them in. We definitely still service that aspect of the community, but we were founded specifically to address the folks that were getting left behind. Yes?
Yeah, so you mentioned there's a section on the employer's profile that talks about why their workplace is better for veterans.
Yes.
Can you give us some examples of how a workplace can be better or worse specifically for veterans?
Absolutely. So I think things that I typically look for, just in my experience, would be, do they have a veterans organization already set up within? So are they providing support to the veterans in? Some even go as far as to have a military spouse organization. So you can kind of tell how organized they are as a company. I think retention rate is really big. Obviously, that's not something that we can likely put on there, especially if it's not good. If it's good, then companies absolutely want to share it. But I think for veterans, yeah, that's another important aspect. And I think if that is the case, companies absolutely need to be highlighting that. And in general, I think trying to show how your culture aligns with military culture. So certain aspects of that. One of the big things we hear is that folks get upset that they can't find that continued sense of purpose. So any way that you can indicate that your company is mission-driven, is a community, and does something purposeful. And I've seen CPGs write copy where it's like, wow, that sounds really, really purposeful, making those crackers. So I think there's a way to look at the company that works in that vein.
Time for one more.
So clearance is a very sensitive thing, but
Yes.
also very important.
Yeah.
Do you do anything to help with connecting people in that scenario?
We have not at this point, because our primary focus is Fortune 1000s, and they're largely, I would say that's more of a concern for like the security companies. We do work with Gavin DeBecker, which does private security, but we don't currently have an emphasis on clearance, although that's something that's very attractive when we talk to folks at bases.
Cool. Let's hear it for
All right.
Hirepurpose.
Thank you very much.
Our next demo is going to be from